Good afternoon and welcome to today's NIH, SBIR, STTR Program Specifics and Strategic Planning webinar. Today's webinar is hosted by the Center for Innovative Technology. I'm Robert Brook. I'm the Director of Federal Funding Programs here at CIT. CIT is a state-funded nonprofit. Our mission is to create technology-based economic development strategies to accelerate innovation, imagination, and the next generation of technology and technology companies. Created in 1985 as a nonprofit, we plug the gaps at the earliest stages of the innovation continuum and help entrepreneurs launch and grow high-growth technology companies and create high-paying jobs for the future. Three main programs that help support this with regards to funding issues that early stage technology companies often require is our Gap Investment Seed Fund, in that we have actually a couple different funds. The typical Gap Fund, which is a 100K seed fund for early stage technology companies with a high potential for growth and high economic return for the Commonwealth. And then there's also a sub-fund of that called the Founders Fund, Virginia Founders Fund, which can invest in a slightly smaller amount. And the goal of that is to actually focus on investing in women-owned, minority-owned, and veteran-owned companies across the Commonwealth and in Northern Virginia, as well as focus on investments outside of Northern Virginia. So there are opportunities for everybody in the state in that. The Commonwealth Research Commercialization Fund, or CRCF, is a grant-based fund. It's an annual solicitation that typically opens sometime in the fall of each year. Letter of intent deadline typically in about December of each year. Proposals due late January of each year, and awards announced typically each June. There are several technology sectors that are typically announced as priority focus areas. There's other eligibility rules. So if you have any questions about this for next year, you feel free to go to our website at CIT.org and look more information on the CRCF. And finally, the Federal Funding Assistance Program, which I manage, focuses pretty much on the SBIR and STTR programs. We work exclusively with Virginia-based companies, as does all of CIT. We do some strategy consultation and mentoring. We do workshops and webinars like today, as well as full-day, multi-day workshops across the Commonwealth each year. We do have referrals to expert proposal consultants, such as today's instructor from BBC. I work heavily with our investment team from our Gap Investment Seed Fund to look at companies that might have an interest in learning more about venture capital and how you become ready for some agencies, particularly in NIH and NSF agencies that require some additional follow-on money that will not be typically their money. We have a small Phase 0 and Phase 00 award program, which I manage. It helps applicants for Phase 1 and Phase 2 to help you hire that outside consultant. Typically pays for a portion of that, not the whole thing. And there is an advance application required for that. So let me know as far in advance as you can, and we can see if we can be of help on that. And then finally, in our CRCF grant program I mentioned to you, part of that, one of the programs in that is a matching grant for both SBIR and STTR. So that would be, again, it's an annual solicitation. You should look into that. If you're a recipient or you plan to apply sometime this year, that is something you might want to learn about, especially if it's life science related, as that is one of the key technology areas of interest to us. So there's typically is eligibility on that. So any other questions, let me know. We do have some training coming up. For those who might be viewing this in a recorded version later, please look at our website at cit.org/events for any updates or more recent. But we do have a full-day NIH SBIR workshop coming up in Falls Church on April 24th, and then a follow-on day in Charlottesville, the same event, the NIH NSF workshop. These are low cost and typically have 20 to 25 attendees, so really great opportunity to really have some hands-on one-on-one questions, as well as a lot of good discussion and instruction. We have two other follow-on webinars to today's webinar, and again, these will all be posted, so you can always view these again. part 2 is going to be proposal preparation essentials for the NIH, SBIR, and STTR. That's going to be on February 28th, 2019. And then on March 7th, part 3 of the series, developing the budget. That's on March 7th, and these are all at 1 o'clock. Today's webinar, and typically all these are planned for about an hour. They might go a little bit longer due to some of the complexity of some of the discussions, and if there's Q&A. So plan for at least 1:15 today, 2:15. Apologize if it constrains anybody, but we want to make sure we cover all the material appropriately. We also have recorded sessions, and this is the link where these webinars will be posted, so you can always refer to this. We will send the webinars, PDF versions of today's webinar material to everybody after the session, so you have this information available to refer to, so you can look at this link here to follow up if you want to view the webinar again. This is my contact information, and so feel free to reach out to me. I'm always happy, as I mentioned to you, to make an introduction to my coworkers on either our investment team and or our grant-based program. So let me know, and as I get Andrea's material up here. And Andrea, I think you should be able to move the slides forward. I'm going to give her just a quick bio of Andrea. Andrea Johansson is a senior principal consultant at BBC ETC with over 25 years of experience in leading international collaborative research projects. Prior to joining BBC in 2006, she was responsible for developing a portfolio of agricultural biotechnology projects at Michigan State University's Institute of International Agriculture, and for reporting to federal funding agencies about the program. She has also served as an international consultant on a broad range of issues relating to international agricultural development, biotechnology, biosafety, international property rights, intellectual property rights, and technology transfer. She holds a PhD in plant pathology from Reading University in UK, a master's in plant pathology from Cornell University, and a Master of Arts in Natural Sciences from Cambridge University in the UK. And with that, Andrea, welcome. I'm pleased to have you on today. And as far as BBC is one of the leading consultants on SBIR in the country. We have utilized BBC quite heavily over many years. They're one of our go-to consultants, and we particularly engaged with them with our NIH webinar series and other training. They're the ones who are giving the workshops I mentioned to you earlier. So with that, Andrea, take it away.
Okay, great. Thank you, Rob.
Oh,
so,
and if I can interrupt quickly, if anybody has a question, you feel free to use the questions box. There is a question box you can pull out on your system, and what I will do is I'll endeavor to answer those as they come in, or at the appropriate time to answer those. Sometimes it might take a few minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes to get to the appropriate time, and if we don't get to your question, we would gladly talk to you offline about that. But go ahead, Andrea, I apologize. It's all yours.
No problem. Okay, I'll just see if my arrows are working here. Yeah, the arrows are not, but I can work. I can work with this. Don't worry. Okay, so as Rob said, I'm with BBC. We're a company. We're now kind of virtual, but basically based in Michigan, in and around Michigan, and we essentially help companies write SBIRs. In Michigan, we are funded by the state to help Michigan companies, but we work with companies from all over the United States. I'm very happy to do so. If you want to know more about us, this is our website, bbcetc.com. Please feel free to go there and explore, and I'll show you a slide at the end of the presentation today as to how you can move forward and engage us if that's what you would like to do. So just a brief overview of what we're going to do to talk about today, and this is a lot to talk about in an hour. As Rob said, there's another webinar coming up in a couple of weeks, I think, about actually writing the proposal. This is kind of not, it's the prologue to that. It's how to even start thinking about approaching the NIH and SBIR. I am, although, making some assumptions that you know already some of the basic rules of SBIR, because we're not going to talk about those, but we're going to talk mainly about the NIH and exploring the NIH, talking about the NIH SBIR program specifically, how to find the solicitations, how to download them, how to find a home for your project, so looking for a topic, determining which part of the NIH is interested in what it is that you're doing. A little bit of time on the review process, and in doing that, it actually sets us up for proposal preparation for the next webinar, because it's we need to know about the review process in order to understand what we need to put in the proposal. Okay. So very, very brief introduction. Again, I'm assuming that you know a lot of this information already, because I'm not going to dwell on it a lot. But just to introduce the SBIR program here, it is a $2.6, $2.7 billion federal funding program every year. Those acronyms are Small Business Innovation Research and Small Business Technology Transfer. The programs SBIR and STTR are almost identical, apart from some rules about who can be the PI and how much you can subcontract. Again, I'm not going to go into detail on that, but when I use the word SBIR, I usually mean both SBIR and STTR. And if there's a difference, you know, I'll draw attention to that. What is SBIR there for? It's there to stimulate technological innovation in the private sector, to get the federally funded research that has been sponsored in the universities and research institutions out into the private sector, to strengthen small business, the role of small business in doing that, and essentially getting commercial application of the research that's been going on with federal funds over the years. So technological innovation, commercial application, those are the kind of buzzwords here for SBIR that you're looking at when you're putting together your proposal. The program is obviously much broader than the National Institutes of Health. That $2.6 billion is shared among 11 federal agencies, and here they are, laid out in this pie chart. The biggest piece of the pie goes to the Department of Defense, because they have the biggest research budget. And the SBIR is a percentage of the research budget of each of these agencies. So that's why it falls out this way. The National Institutes of Health is the second biggest piece of the pie, and that's actually Health and Human Services, of which NIH is a huge part. And then the smaller agencies, Energy, NSF, NASA, and all the others there. But you can see that DoD, NIH, DOE, and NSF, and NASA are the big ones. So one thing about SBIR and STTR, it's about more than just your cool science. In other words, this is not a mechanism just to help you fund your basic research. So a lot of universities come into this and they just want to fund, just do a bit more on their project that they've been working on already. But this is not basic research. This is definitely research that's headed towards product development and developing small businesses. So it's about definitely that marriage of business and science. And that's what makes it fun in terms of working with companies, for me anyway. So you have to bring the business side of things, the commercialization side of things, and marry it with the science, bring those two together. And although these proposals are very much R&D technical proposals, you do have to understand your market and your competition and intellectual property and all those other things to put together a great proposal. So it's not enough just to write a basic research proposal. You do have to have that aspect of things in there. So again, very quickly, what do you need? You have to have a small business. It sounds obvious, but it's before you can even apply, you must have the small business. It must exist. When you apply, it can exist in name and on paper only. It doesn't. You don't have to have actually very much in it, but it has to exist and it has to be eligible. And there are some eligibility rules that are fairly straightforward. You need a project team. So SBIR is not about, it's not a one-man or one-woman show. You are going to be pulling a team together. That team is going to involve the people in your company, the key personnel, your technicians, the junior personnel in the company. It's probably going to involve collaboration with another research institution, whether it's a university, research hospital, or whatever, or another company. You're probably going to have a consultant or two also on your team. So it's all about building a team. You need to start thinking about who that team is. When you apply, you don't need to have all that team in place yet, but you do definitely need to lay out a plan for how that team is going to look. And you need a principal investigator, the person who is the technical lead on the project. This individual is key, obviously, very, very key in the NIH, well, all of the agencies really. Even though it's a team, the principal investigator, the key technical lead is hugely important in terms of the review process. The reviewers are looking very seriously at who this individual is and whether they have the experience and the expertise, not just to do the R&D, but to themselves at the lab bench or whatever, but also to manage the project. So it's not just somebody with those technical skills necessarily, but it's the technical leadership skills. Have they managed projects before? Have they been responsible for more than their own little part of the work before? So those individuals are very important. And the qualifications for those individuals varies a little bit from agency to agency. For the NIH, those individuals are typically an advanced degree investigator with previous research experience in the NIH space. You need company facilities. This is one of the rules that often upsets people. Because this is a mechanism that is involved, is all about growing small businesses, you are expected to have company facilities. And those facilities have to be under your control and suitable to get the work done. So you can't just do this in your university lab or in someone else's university lab. Although you can do part of it under those facilities, you must have your own company facilities. Obviously, you can rent them, you can get incubator space, whatever is appropriate for you. But that is a rule, and it has to happen. And also, it may seem obvious, but you also need to have a project. I say it may seem obvious, but a lot of people have an idea. They know what their product is going to be. They know where they're going. They know what it is they're going to produce at the end of the day, but now they have to fit this into a project that looks like an SBIR, and often that's one of the struggles that we have in helping people fit into this mechanism. It's not the same as other mechanisms, and we'll see a little bit why as we go through, but you have to have a project. For SBIR, that project is about a 3 to 4 year project length, and it's in different phases, and we'll look at that as we go through as it applies to the NIH, although that does apply all across the agencies. And your project and your product must have innovation and commercial potential. Both of them have to exist. It's in the title. Innovation is in the title. It has to be novel. It has to be new. It has to be, exciting, a little bit groundbreaking, something a little bit different that no one has done before, obviously. And you have to be able to make money from it, because otherwise, it's not going to be very useful. So again, for small businesses to grow, for this technology to get out there, you need these two sides of the coin here, the innovation and the commercial potential in your final product. And I said already, but you must develop a product. So this is not just interesting research. You are not investigating, studying, exploring, or anything of that sort. You are building a product, developing a product, and every single SBIR project has to end in an actual product that you can sell. Obviously, how you sell it is going to vary depending on your product and your strategy as a company. But eventually, you are going to have something tangible that you are going to sell. So you're not just interested in this or studying it, investigating it. You are definitely ending this process with a product. So all of those assumptions. So your company is eligible. Again, there are some rules for that. You have to be based in the US and so on. You must have a qualified principal investigator. We're assuming that you kind of know that you have a project which fits within the NIH. We'll talk a little bit more about that. I'm assuming that you will have, or that you have already, the appropriate resources that you need to get this, put this thing together. That the funding cycles match with your commercialization goals. That essentially says, this money is really, really slow to get. And if you intend to get this done in the next 6 months, then SBIR is probably not for you. So you need to kind of plan and strategize depending on how this money comes through. And it's quite slow money to get. And also we're assuming here that you already decided that you're focusing on the NIH. And here we are, finally, NIH. So now the rest of what I say today, although it meant much of it will apply to other agencies, we're going to look at the NIH in detail here. And the NIH, I think, as I said already, is part of Health and Human Services. So we're going to look at the NIH structure, how the NIH works. That's really important because your proposal doesn't go just broadly into the NIH. It goes into a specific part of the NIH. We'll look at that. It goes into an institute. We're going to look at how to find the solicitations. Where are they? And again, look at reviews and how to work with the NIH. And finally, we're going to leave you with how to define your project and then kind of abandon you until the next webinar where we talk about how you actually write your proposal. Sorry, technical problem there, clicking. Okay, so NIH is part of Health and Human Services. Health and Human Services also includes the FDA and the CDC and a couple of other little agencies within itself, but the NIH has the biggest part of the budget. So the other ones, the CDC and the FDA, you'll see have very small amounts of money in the 3 to 9 million ballpark, whereas the NIH has the biggest part of the money here, 940 million in 2018. So we're really talking mainly about the NIH here, although the applications for the FDA and the CDC are almost identical. So always start any presentation on SBIR, especially the NIH, with just looking at the mission of the NIH, which is on its website. It's very easy to find, and it's to seek fundamental knowledge about the nature and behavior of living systems and the application of that knowledge to enhance health, lengthen life, and reduce illness and disability. And one of the things that we coach people on as they develop their proposals is that their proposal must address the fundamental mission of the NIH. So people often write proposals that look great for themselves and their clients or whatever, or their people who are buying things from them. But I'm like, what's in this for the NIH? Why would the NIH fund what it is that you're doing? And those of you who are familiar with writing any kind of grants to any foundations or any grant-giving organizations at all will know or should know that you must always, always, always address the mission of the people who are giving you the money, because the people who are giving you the money have people that they have to report to, and they have to their outputs, they're going to give those back, show those to the people who are giving them the money, and they have to fulfill their mission. So we're always, always addressing the mission of the people who are giving us the money, and that's the NIH. And so your proposal, whatever it's about, whether it's curing cancer, or whether it's developing a platform technology that is going to help you manufacture drugs, or whatever it is, whether it's very upstream or very downstream, very kind of bedside or very technical upstream, you must still show very clearly in your proposal how you are addressing the mission of the NIH, which is essentially to improve human health. That's, I mean, essentially what it is, and your proposal must state that explicitly and very clearly. This is the NIH website. There's a lot of information here. I'll show you just a little way around it, just to show you where you go to find the SBIR information. These days, everybody knows how to find their way around a website. We used to have to show people, but times have moved on, so that's good. But anyway, the NIH website has a lot of information, and if you're interested in applying to the NIH, find your way around a little bit and explore. One of the most important things is that the National Institutes of Health is just that. It is institutes. It's made up of 27 separate institutes and centers. So each of those institutes and centers has its own budget, its own missions and priorities, and its own slightly different ways of deciding which grants to fund. So one of the pieces of homework we give you very early on in the application process is to determine which of the institutes within the NIH is most interested in funding what you do. So although you apply and you submit your proposal to the NIH, it then goes to one of these institutes for funding. So it doesn't stay in the big kind of organization. It goes to one of these individual institutes where there is a program director who is responsible for SBIR projects within that institute, and that's where it is funded and managed from that point on. So if you look at these, you may be familiar with them, but there's the National Cancer Institute, Allergy and Infectious Diseases, Child Health and Development, Institute on Drug Abuse, and so on and so on. They are largely organized on the basis of clinical indications, very, very, very broadly. It's usually by disease indication. So, you know, heart, lung, and blood takes everything for cardiac and blood diseases, allergy and infectious diseases. It's obvious. Each of these institutes has a website. You can go there, you can look at what it is that they do, and I'll show you another place that you can find that information. And for most of you, it will be very, very obvious. If you're developing a cardiac drug, it is almost certainly going to be funded, we hope, by the National Heart, Lung and Blood Institute, NHLBI. If you're developing a cancer therapeutic, it's almost certainly going to be funded by the National Cancer Institute, NCI. But there are others of you that might be a little less obvious. So a little homework is required here to find out exactly where your technology might fit. This is even more for things like platform technologies. So if you have a platform that can develop drugs for different indications, where does this go? What are you going to do? Where are you going to focus here? Now, usually our advice is to focus on one thing and not to kind of scatter your project too broadly. But one of the ways that we recommend that you find this out, obviously, is to research the institute and then to speak to the program director in the institute and actually have a conversation with those individuals before you even get very far into writing your grant. So most of us want to avoid that. I'll show you some tips on how to find their names and email addresses and phone numbers and the kind of conversations you should have with them, but we definitely advise that you do that. One of the other quite nice things about SBIR is that you can dual assign your project. So you get a primary assignment and a secondary assignment. So say you have a cancer therapeutic that is for pediatric cancers, you can submit your proposal with a primary assignment to the National Cancer Institute and a secondary assignment to Child Health and Development. And sometimes that gives both institutes the possibility of picking that up and funding it. So that's quite a good thing. So I said each of these institutes has its own website. Here they are, a list of all the institutes with links. Let's see if my little arrows come up here if I click in the right place. They may or may not. I'm clicking madly here. So just pulling up here, National Institute for Allergy and Infectious Diseases. This is my favorite institute, mainly because they have some great resources here, tutorials, flowcharts, and information on how to write an NIH proposal. Not specifically an SBIR proposal, but most NIH research proposals have the same kind of structure. With a few small differences. So they actually do have a lot of resources here and all over the NIH website, but NIAID is particularly great at this. So go to your institute, find out a little bit about it. Not surprisingly, these institutes each have their own budget and they don't all have the same amount of money. So the priorities here, you can see the biggest budget is at the National Cancer Institute, Allergy and Infectious Diseases, and so on, all the way around to the teeny tiny institutes such as Nursing Research, which has a budget of almost nothing. It's up here right at the top. A tiny SBIR budget. So you might think, well, you know, I should definitely apply to NCI, but the issue is actually that the NCI is a hugely competitive institute. A lot of proposals go in there. So don't choose, if you have a choice, don't necessarily choose an institute in terms of which has the most budget, because they may be more competitive than some of the smaller ones. So we've worked with several clients at BBC who've applied to Nursing Research, and I think so far every single one of them has been funded. So we've got a 100% success rate for the National Institute of Nursing Research. They don't get as many great proposals as they would like. So that's just a little anecdote there. So the NIH has its own SBIR, STTR website. This is at sbir.nih.gov. You can go there and find out everything you want to know about SBIR. You don't need to listen to the rest of this webinar. You can just go there and surf. But I'll just show you, it's very hard these days with slides to show people around websites because websites are fancier than they used to be. But just to kind of show you around this what you can see here and give you a clue in the next couple of slides. The NIH SBIR program has essentially the same purpose as all the other SBIR programs and all the different agencies to stimulate technological innovation by developing new technologies, refining existing technologies, and developing new applications for existing technologies. This doesn't mean just kind of tweaking something that already exists. It does still mean that there has to be a high level of innovation. But it is possible. Not every SBIR has to be something that is entirely groundbreaking, paradigm shifting, or whatever. If you explore a little bit on the website, as I'll show you in a moment, you'll be surprised at some of the very broad range of projects that get funded. And again, the whole goal of the program is to increase the commercial application of other NIH-supported research by developing new or medical biological products with improved value, improved efficiency, and improved costs. And that's the same across all of the federal agencies. And because this is a federal program, it's managed by the Small Business Administration, the SBA. The rules are essentially the same across all the agencies, but each agency does things a tiny little bit differently. And I'll point that out as we go through here. But for every agency, it is a 3-phase program: phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. That is standard across all of the agencies. Phase 1 is always a feasibility study. So whatever it is, when you're coming into this program, you always have to, I'll give you an exception in a moment, but almost always you start with a phase 1 project. And a phase 1 project is typically 6 to 12 months. In length, we advise everybody just to submit a 12-month project. And the budget for that is between $150,000 and $225,000. I'll talk a bit more about budgets in a little while, but it's a phase 1 feasibility study. It's a proof of concept study. You are definitely, it's not just step-by-step research. The phase 1, you have to come out at the end of it with some clear, quantifiable go, no-go criteria. You have to have some milestones that will show the reviewers that you've succeeded and you've proven the feasibility of what it is that you're doing. So developing this, deciding what this feasibility study is extremely important in determining kind of where this project is going and how the project is structured over the phase 1 and the phase 2. Phase 2, which is not surprisingly after phase 1, is still R&D. It's 2 years typically of continuing R&D, and the budget is usually at $1 to $1.5 million for those 2 years. Still R&D. It's not commercialization. It's not marketing. It is still technical R&D. I'm just going to skip that phase 2B for a moment and go to phase 3. Phase 3 for SBIR is kind of the phase that's disappointing in one sense because no one is giving you the money for this. Phase 3 is commercialization. So this is after phase 1 and phase 2, after you've developed the technology. Most of these agencies are not giving you money for the commercialization phase of this. This is where you're expected to be bringing in money from other sources or to have raised money for other sources to do the marketing and distribution and manufacturing and everything else that entails you getting a product to market. But NIH certainly is very rarely the customer. Some of the other agencies, the contracting agencies like the Department of Defense and NASA, there may be a procurement aspect in this, but for the NIH, that does not exist. Phase 2B, I'm going to come back to in just a moment. Phase 2B is a phase that is after phase 2, which is great under some circumstances, but comes with some strings, and I'll talk about that in a couple of slides, I think. So here's that again a little bit here. So on the left-hand side, we have the phase 1, which is the discovery, the feasibility, going on to phase 2, which is the full R&D. Phase 2B here is filling this gap here between phase 2 and phase 3, which is commercialization. It is $3 million for up to 3 years. It's additional R&D money, but not every institute participates in this. So it's not kind of a standard thing that you can get. It's only under some circumstances with some institutes. So phase 1, I mentioned already, it's 6 to 12 months. Phase 2 is usually 2 years. We'll look at budgets again in a moment. Okay, phase 2B, more detail. So you can't just have a phase 2B. You have to have previously had a successful phase 1 and a successful phase 2 before you can apply for a phase 2B. So you have to be successful in those first two phases. And the phase 2B is for those technologies that might require more time and effort to develop. And it's often for those that have a lot of regulatory approval to go through. So it's an understanding, obviously, that you cannot get everything done in a 3-year project for many of these technologies and products. So there is an offer of essentially another $3 million here for over 3 years, where you can continue to do the regulatory work and further development. And again, as I said, not every institute does this. And by this point, you are expected to be in close contact and discussion with your program staff in the institute before you leap into this. You definitely need kind of their go-ahead and to have discussed this with them before you do this.
I'm having trouble connecting to the internet. Take a look at the...
So moving on, a new relative, I say new, it's come back. So at the bottom of the slide here, you'll see direct to phase 2. This is new because it just came back. They tried this as a pilot a couple of years ago now. It ended, there was a gap, but now you are able to do this again. So the direct to phase 2 is a mechanism to allow you to, if you already have great, clear, strong feasibility data and proof of concept data, you are now allowed to apply direct to phase 2. So you don't have to do a phase 1, you can come straight in at the phase 2 in this direct to phase 2 program. The phase 1 research that you've done must have been done without SBIR money, so with other funds, and it does have to be very clear and good phase 1 feasibility, phase 1 type feasibility data. Not every institute does participate in this, and this is only SBIR. You cannot do an STTR under this mechanism. This mechanism is great for people who really have passed the feasibility phase. However, it's not for the faint of heart, because you really do have to have that clear data. And also, when you go into phase 2, you're required to provide a lot more detailed information on your company and your commercialization plan and all of that. Many companies who really would like to do this aren't actually ready to do this, even though they may be very excited at the idea of doing this. And the other mechanism that is slightly different here is a fast track. So instead of a phase 1 and a phase 2, instead of just going straight to the phase 2, a fast track is where you submit both the phase 1 and the phase 2 together. You still have a feasibility study, but it's tacked onto a phase 2, and you submit them both at once. So again, this is a little bit like the direct phase 2. This is tougher to get than just going into a phase 1, because the program is structured as it is for a reason. Phase 1 here will give you a little bit of money, go away, see what you can do. If you can give us good data, then we'll give you the $1.5 million. Fast track is kind of a trust me thing, where you're saying, hey, we can do it, trust me. And they're going to be looking at your proposal very, very closely if you put in a fast track. And this is typically not a mechanism that is for like brand new startups, because you need a lot of information and a lot of support letters and things here that show that you can be a successful company, not just that you have a great technology. So again, a lot of companies really want to do a fast track, very enthusiastic about it. Here's the kind of the checklist that we show them or discuss with them. Do you have great data? How great is your data? Do you have milestones that are really achievable and solid? Do you have a well-conceived commercialization plan? Because in a phase 2, a direct to phase 2 or a fast track, you have to present a 12-page commercialization plan. And many companies that would want to do this just don't have that yet, because they don't have the information they would need. Typically, this is not your first SBIR. If you have previous SBIRs, you're more likely to be kind of in the running to get one of these. You do really need some very strong letters of phase 3 support. That's strategic partners, investors, and partners, distributors, whatever you need to get into commercialization. Very strong, not general kind of blah, blah. This is great kind of letters, but very strong commitment letters. Ideally, a track record of commercialization, and you never leap into this without discussing it with the NIH first and with the program staff. So how does the NIH release its proposals? Several ways here. You can find them on the internet obviously by searching NIH SBIR solicitations or whatever. The NIH guide is a document that's released every week that has these in. Grants.gov is a government portal that has information on all of the federal grants, so you can find the information there. And then I'll show you in a moment where you find it at the NIH website, which is the easiest way to find it. The NIH releases its two essential types of solicitations. One are called parent announcements, or the omnibus mechanisms, and every NIH mechanism, the basic ones to SBIR, have an omnibus or a parent announcement. And this is essentially an announcement, a call for proposals that comes out once a year but has 3 deadlines. So it's one call with 3 deadlines throughout the year. And I'll show you how that works for SBIR in just a minute. And this is investigator initiated. You do not have to find a topic. You don't have to search for exactly what it is that you're doing. It's there. You can apply to it. If you have an idea, you come up with the idea. In addition, the NIH and other agencies have special targeted opportunities that come out throughout the year that are different, where they see a specific need and they want proposals with a specific focus. So that's a little bit different. They're much more targeted. But most people, obviously the majority of people, apply to the omnibus solicitation, but it's well worth keeping an eye out for these special targeted opportunities throughout the year. And you can sign up for email lists to make sure that you get those. So the NIH SBIR omnibus solicitation comes out once a year. I think it's coming out this year in April. They keep changing when they're releasing it, but I think they've decided on April now. Investigator-initiated research, it includes phase 1, phase 2, direct phase 2, and fast track, same solicitation. It has 3 deadlines a year. They are April 5th, September 5th, and January 5th, or as we call them at BBC, April 1st, September 1st, and January the 1st, because you never ever want to submit your proposal on the last day. So we advise that people submit 5 days early. I could tell you stories as to why you should absolutely do that. An awful lot can go wrong when you submit these things, and you can fix most things if you have 3-4 days to fix them. Not so much at 5 minutes to 5 p.m. on the final day. There are budget guidelines and budget caps. Ignore the budget guidelines. I still don't understand why they issue them. Budget caps for SBIR are phase 1, $225,000. Phase 2, $1.5 million. That's what you can ask for. That's the most you can ask for. You should definitely ask for the most that you can ask for. So that's our advice on that. I'm not going to talk about contracts and grants, but there are, in addition to the granting mechanism, which is the omnibus that I just talked about, and most of the targeted ones, the NIH also has a contracting mechanism. It does release a contract solicitation every September-ish, which is there are slightly more, again, targeted opportunities that come out. Everybody wants to see the success rates. These are the last ones I pulled out, and they're pretty much the same from year to year. This is SBIR on the left, STTR on the right. It goes from phase 1 to a fast track to a regular phase 2, direct phase 2 to a phase 2B. Phase 2B, phase 2's almost always around the 40% mark. Very high success rate for phase 2s. Remember, to get a phase 2, typically you have to have had a phase 1, so you've already been successful at quite a lot. Direct phase 2 is slightly lower here, which is not surprising because you haven't already had a successful phase 1. Phase 1 success rates are around 15, 16, 17% year to year. So that's fairly standard, and the fast track is about the same success rate as the phase 1, so relatively tough to get. So I said we'd go back to the NIH website here. This is their website, their page for grants and funding. I'll just click on some of these things here. All of these sections here will help you. Go here, click on all these things. They will take you through a lot of the process of applying for NIH grants. There are schematics and flowcharts and a lot of information that is here, how to plan, how to apply, how review works. a little grant process overview chart. You can click on each of these things. It will tell you how to register, how to apply, what goes on. Again, I'm not going to go through all of that. You can and should definitely connect with the NIH in a few ways, just to definitely subscribe to their listservs, and SBIR listserv, an NIH guide to grants and contracts that you should definitely sign up for. Then you will get emails. I think it's only just once a week. It's not crazy. That will keep you up to date with what's going on at NIH and the solicitations and special solicitations and so on. Obviously, a lot of ways to connect these days in terms of Twitter and Instagram and everything else. So here we are back to the SBIR page at the NIH, just to quickly show you through this. So if you're new to SBIR, again, you can click here. It will take you through a lot of schematics and charts and flowcharts. And each of these, when you click on each of these, it'll tell you more about the SBIR program at the NIH, the basics, the rules, and help you through that. And you also go here to find the solicitations themselves, and to find and to download the application forms and to begin the application process. So here is the funding opportunity announcements. The omnibus solicitation is here, and this is where you download, where you see the solicitations and where you download them. So there are now more solicitations than there used to be. The reason for that is that they are separated. They're separated by SBIR and STTR, and they're separated by whether you're allowed to do a clinical trial or not. So there are now 4 solicitations: SBIR with clinical trial, SBIR without clinical trial, STTR with, STTR without, and so on. So this is where you find those solicitations. When you click on the link here, that'll take you to the solicitation itself. Another document that's important here is the program descriptions and research topics. I mentioned earlier that there's a place you can go to find out what each of these institutes does in detail and what they're interested in, those 27 institutes and centers. This is the document. This is the place to go for that. It's a very valuable document. And maybe even more valuable in terms of money anyway is a document that comes out every year, which is an SBA approved topics for budget waivers. I said that each phase 1 is 225,000, a phase 2 is 1.5 million, but there are certain topic areas where you can exceed the budget waivers. So clearly everyone's going to want to look at that document and see if their project can exceed the budget waiver. So 27 institutes and centers, where do you go? Where do you fit? Again, for many people, it will be obvious. I'll show you these three basic ways that you can do this. You can search the NIH Reporter, which is a database. We'll look at that quickly. You can look in that research topics and program descriptions document that I just showed you before, and you can look at the study and review sections of the NIH. And we'll look at that briefly. And I see time is going on, so it's going to be very briefly. So the NIH Reporter database, it's a searchable database for all NIH projects. So this is a great place to come if you're a data person and you like doing this stuff. But it's very useful to come here and you can search the database for all NIH funded projects. This is what it looks like. It's called Reporter. And it's like a database. It has a lot of pull down fields and things that you can select here for different projects. You can put in keywords for your project. You can see how many active projects there are, SBIRs. You can put in the state, congressional district. Very many ways you can explore this database. Most people obviously would come here and put in some keywords and see what comes up for what it is that they do. So I put in the word balance here because someone was looking at some kind of balance board for helping someone who's struggling to balance because of a brain injury. Actually, this project was. So if you put in balance, this actually pulled up, I think it was 119 different projects that have the word balance in the title. And then this has a lot of use here. If you can click down through these results that come up and find a lot of information. So that's a project. One project here, which is footwear-based physical activity biofeedback device for weight management. And this information is all available for you publicly. Who the principal investigator is, who the company was, the abstract for their entire project is here. So it's actually a lot of very useful information. What kind of projects are there like yours? Is there anything, has someone done exactly what it is that you're doing, or what related projects are there? This will also help you you can see which institute funded it. You can see which review group reviewed it. You can find the PI's name and usually email address and mailing address and everything. So this is a very useful database for a lot of things, but one of the things it's useful for is to finding out which of the institutes might be interested in what you do. So back to the program descriptions and research topics document. This one is the one that you find out all the details of the institutes. It's a relatively boring looking document here, but as you get into it, you can download it in Word or PDF. You can see each institute has its own section in this document. And many of these institutes are large, and they have a lot of different, although it's allergy and infectious diseases, there's a lot of subsections within that. So for example, here we have the therapeutics research program and a drug development and clinical sciences branch. So you can go and you can look at all the areas of interest that this institute has, and some of them are very broad. And you'll see that each of these sections of research often has the name of a different individual underneath it. This is the director, down here is a contact, whatever. But so each of these institutes has one individual who is the overall program director. But because these institutes are very large and very broad in what they do, some of them have 10, 11, 12 program directors. So it's good to find the one that does what you do. And this document will help you do that. You can go here and you can see the information and find out what it is that you do and where it fits. So if you're in drug development, then it's Joe Fitzgibbon that you're going to want to contact. And his contact details are here. And these individuals, this is what they do. This is their job, to speak with you, to help you, to guide you, and to make sure they can get the best proposals possible into their sections. So they're your advocate. It's very, very good to speak to them, make sure that what it is that you're doing is of interest to them, it's something they want to fund. And often these individuals will give you a lot of guidance and help in putting your proposal together. So absolutely contact these people. Oh, there's my arrows. Okay. And again, so a lot of these institutes have different individuals that you can contact. And you can also download the information from other sites on the web as well, all of contact details that there are. Obviously, if you contact the wrong person in an institute, those individuals will probably put you in contact with the right one, so don't stress too much about that. But absolutely contact them. Never consider putting a proposal in without first having discussed this with the NIH. Most of these people we found to be extremely helpful in giving feedback to individuals. We recommend, just out of kind of courtesy and etiquette, to send them an email with a short document, an abstract, or a specific aims page. Do not send them your patents or your slide decks or whatever. So send them information first, and then ask if they will set up a phone call with you, and they will almost always do that. But send them something small. And essentially, I've got some items to discuss here that you can discuss with them, but you can discuss anything with them. They are on your side, and it's in their interest to help you, and it's in your interest to get information from them. So we encourage you to do that, even though none of us want to do that. Please try and do that. So the grant review process at the NIH is somewhat complicated. I will never manage to cover this in 6 minutes, but I'll just give you an overview of how this works. Why do we care? Because we want to know what the rubric is. As I tell whenever my children come to me for help with their homework, I say, what's the rubric? What have you? I need to see the instructions on what you've been asked to do, and I need to see how you're being graded. So we want to look at what the reviewers are being asked to look for and how they are being told to grade your paper. So it is peer review at the NIH. It is, this is a system that we have. It is not perfect, but it is a system we have to work with. So it often feels like this. But we have no choice. This is the system that there is, and so we have to understand how it works and work within it. One of the institutes, or actually the centers of the NIH, is the Center for Scientific Review. And this is a center that is completely independent of all those institutes. It's not linked to those in any way. And this is the center that manages review. So it manages the entire review process. It assigns any applications that come in to a review group, and also called a study section. And it also assigns applications to the institute or center where it best fits. Now, your job as a principal investigator who's putting in a proposal is to tell them where it's going. So it will do this, they will do this for you if you don't do it. But we strongly recommend, and they recommend, that you do this work first and you decide which institute it should go to and which review group it should go to. And you can put that on a form when you submit your proposal. The study section, the Centers for Scientific Review has its own website. It's here, you can explore it, take a look around. Again, some interesting tutorials and information available here for you. So there's obviously instructions for applicants here. It tells you all about how the review process works with frequently asked questions and so on, how to write, what are the deadlines, etc. My favorite section, however, is the section for reviewers, because I really want to know what the reviewers are being told. I want to know how they're being told to review the papers. So this is very useful resources here, how to become a reviewer, how it all works, templates, guidelines, tools, and so on. So that's also a good place to go to see what's happening. SBIR and STTR has its own study sections, its own review groups, small business and technology transfer study groups within the Center for Scientific Review. And you can search these if you keep clicking. Okay, so back up one here. So essentially, I don't know how many there are here, but they are each focused on a particular research area. So sorry, now it's clicking like crazy. So I've highlighted one here, which is Small Business Respiratory Sciences, and the Scientific Review Officer is named here. And if you click on these details, it will give you more information about this individual. So this is a study group that is particularly for respiratory sciences, projects that come in under that area. And this gives you a little background on what this review panel does. This individual here is a Scientific Review Officer. He or she manages this study group. He or she is responsible for receiving the proposals and assigning them to review and managing the process. And you can contact this individual. You cannot contact the reviewers, but you can see who they are. At least you can see who they were. You will not know who your reviewers are, obviously, and you should never ever contact them, but you can see past reviewer lists. So you can see these lists of reviewers that we're reviewing in the last review cycle. So this will give you a whole list of them, of all of the individuals that were on the panel. And so we advise people to go here and not to obviously contact these people, but to see, are these the kind of people you want to review your proposal? Do these people have the right expertise, breadth of expertise, experience to review your proposal? So definitely go there, take a look around and see if there is any conflict of interest there. You are allowed to exclude reviewers if you feel that's necessary. You cannot include reviewers, but you can say, no, not this individual is from a competing company or whatever. I don't want these people reviewing my proposal. So these review groups are pulled together. I mean, some of them are there. These study groups are consistent pretty much from cycle to cycle, but people come in and out. And if there's a particular call for proposals, they may set up a specific study group for that with different people in. This is the whole process from applications coming in to funding. I won't go into a great lot of detail here, but essentially you submit your proposal. It goes to the Center for Scientific Review. The Scientific Review Officer will assign it to individuals to review. If it gets through that first kind of triage of review, it will go to the full group for discussion. And then the Scientific Review Officer will put together a report on that review, send it to the institutes. Remember, this is separate from institutes. They will send it to the NIH Institute where it belongs. And within that institute, they have a budget, they have proposals that have been reviewed, and they assign their budget to the best reviewed proposals. That's an internal NIH process within the institute, and as you can see, all of this takes a really long time. Each institute has its funding plan and eventually decides on and releases that plan and starts to ask you to send information to show that you're ready to receive the money and that you have things set up to receive the money. This process from submission to getting money to do your work can take from 9 to 12 months. I wish it were quicker. I'm sorry, it isn't. It's slow money. So again, not a lot of detail here, but just to understand how the process works, your proposal goes to the Center for Scientific Review. The Center for Scientific Review manages the entire process. It will the scientific review officer will assign your proposal to 3 primary individual reviewers. So this individual has a team of reviewers. He or she knows who are the best people to review a proposal. Your proposal is sent to those reviewers, and they give your proposal a preliminary review. It's obviously all anonymous. You have no idea who these individuals are. They will go through, they will review and score and write a summary critique of your proposal. Every proposal that goes in gets this level of review, but only 50% of these go on to the next phase. So each reviewer sets aside 50%. The worst 50% are triaged, and you'll get that proposal back to you with a full review, but not a subsequent review. So those that get through the first review go to a second review, where all of the reviewers sit together in a room in a study group, whether it's virtual or an actual real room. And so there is a study group review, and your proposal is presented to the whole group by your primary or secondary or tertiary reviewer. So each reviewer has a pile of proposals on which they were primary or second reviewer. They present that proposal to the group. The entire group discusses, and they come to some level of, it's a lot more complicated than it probably needs to be, but the way it is done, they will come up with a kind of averaged score at the end of it, and that is the score that is given to your proposal. Got that? So the entire process takes 6 to 9 months. So if you submit at the next deadline, which is April 5th, you will not see any funding from your proposal until around December. Unfortunately, this process is slow. So I didn't realize that was Pokemon, but apparently it is. Okay, so what are the reviewers looking for? We are almost done here. So we'll look at the review criteria. What is the rubric? What are they told to look for in your proposal? 5 review criteria: significance, investigators, innovation, approach, and environment. Because this is SBIR, significance is not just technical merit, it's also commercial value. So they're looking at both sides of it, remember the innovation and commercial potential. So these are the 5 review criteria that they are working to, and they have a little cheat sheet, and this is their cheat sheet for each of these review criteria. Does the study address an important problem? So is it significant? Is this study something really important that needs a solution? Will scientific knowledge or clinical practice be advanced if the aims of this project are achieved? So is this really going to move things forward? Is it significant? What will the effect of these studies be on concepts, methods, technologies, treatments, services, or preventative interventions that drive the field? How important of this is this? And how much of an impact will it have if it's successful? That's significance. On the commercial side of that, they're also looking at how strong is the commercial potential of your project in terms of leading to a marketable product or process. What is it going to be worth? And will it have a competitive advantage over the existing or alternative technologies? So again, is it significant, and is this going to make it to the market? Is there a market for it? And is this and are these people the group that can do that and are able to achieve that? They're looking at your team. They're looking at your principal investigator, obviously, but everybody else as well. Are they knowledgeable? Are they skilled? Are they persistent, productive? Do they bring complementary and integrated expertise to the project? So that's your investigators, your team. Innovation. Is the project original? Is it innovative? Does it challenge existing paradigms? Does it develop novel concepts, approaches, methodologies? How innovative and novel is it? Very important, because innovation obviously is in the title of SBIR. And the approach. This is the methods. This is the kind of the center of all of this. Is there a solid hypothesis? Are the methods sound? Is the design sound? Are are the applicants acknowledging potential problem areas and alternative tactics? Do they understand what they're doing, and do they understand that stuff could go wrong, and what are they going to do if it does go wrong? Do you know your stuff? Do you have a solid research method and plan here? And environment is the last one. Does the scientific environment in which the work will be done contribute to the probability of success? This review criteria is all about your resources and your facilities. What are your facilities? Do you have the equipment? Do you have the collaborations and the resources available at your collaborators or your partners or whatever? Do you have everything that you need to get this done? That's the environment review criteria. And so all of these are scored. These 5 review criteria each get a score from the reviewers, and the way that it's done is essentially there is a scoring system, and the scoring system works where 1, you can get if you get a 1, that's good. If you get a 9, that's bad. So I'm sorry, so the scoring goes from 1 to 9. So that's the breadth that you have there. 1 is good, 9 is bad. And each of those review criteria gets a score between 1 and 9, and this is the reviewer's rubric. So 1 is exceptional, exceptionally strong with no weaknesses, all the way down to poor, which is very few strengths and numerous major weaknesses. So each of those review criteria gets a score from 1 to 9. And this is the form they put it on. It's a little, they're asked to bullet their information and to so give a number to each criteria, and also to make a few bullet points. What did you like? What did you not like? What was a strength? What was a weakness under those criteria? And this is what the summary statement will look like when you get it. It's called a review. Do remember, every single proposal that gets in will receive this summary statement, even if it only went through that first level of review and didn't go to the whole group review. Each of these, everyone will get one of these. It's kind of hidden in your NIH account, but we can help you find that. It's kind of buried in there, but everyone will get one, and this is very, very helpful. It may be painful, but it's also very helpful to see what the reviewers liked and what they didn't like. So critique 2 here, as you can see, this is reviewer 2, and they graded the significance of 2, investigators a 1, in innovation 3, and so on, and then some bullet points on the things they liked and they didn't like. And then after they've done all this, after they've reviewed those 5 review criteria, they step back and they give your project an overall score. It's called an overall impact score, and this is kind of the same, but it's looking at the whole, not those individual pieces, and they're asked to give, again, a score between 1 and 9. So where 1 is excellent and 9 is really not that great. And this is what your cover page of the summary statement will look like. And you'll see in here that there is a impact or priority score. This is a 22. The way that this works is that your overall impact score will be between an 11 and a 90 because it's averaged and then multiplied by 10. That's the way that it's done in the study group. But every individual reviewer in that study group will give your project a score between 1 and 9. Then that is, again, the mean is taken and it's multiplied. So 11 is very, very good, and a 90 is not that great. So so you'll get these scores will be released, you'll find those, they'll be sent to you, and then a couple of weeks later you will get the full written review, and again everybody will get that. If you did not go, if you were not at the study group, if your proposal was stopped at the first review step, then instead of a score here you will have it will say not discussed, but again you'll still see the individual reviews with those criteria, just not a final number here. So that's essentially it. And then now you know what the reviewers are looking for. You know how to find your home at the NIH. You know the individual you need to speak to at the NIH to discuss what it is that you're doing. Once you see what actually needs to go into the proposal, how the outline is set up, that should help. You'll understand why those reviews criteria, where the review criteria come from, and where to put the information in the proposal to address those review criteria to make sure the reviewers see it. Just to scare you off a little bit, here is the full proposal, all the pieces that need to be in it. In the next webinar, we will be going through each of these very, very quickly to see what goes together, and all of this needs to be done. The main research parts are up here in the top left, the specific aims and the research strategy. These are the research sections, but there are a whole other, and these for a phase 1, it's 7 pages. For a phase 2, it's 12 pages. But by the time all these other pieces are put into the proposal, it all comes to about 65 pages. For a phase 1, about 100 pages for a phase 2. So there's a lot that goes into this, but this is a very useful checklist. You can go through and just make sure every piece gets done here. So I'm almost done. My number one tip for writing a proposal and being successful in grant writing is always, always, always start early and make sure you get you meet the deadline. And just quickly here, I did mention at the beginning, if you go to bbcetc.com, you can find out about us. If you're interested in working with us moving forward, the bottom of the page, our web page here is an SBIR STTR assessment form. If you click on that, it will take you to a very, very simple form, put some basic details in here, and once you've done that, that puts you into our system. And somebody will contact you within a couple of days and set up a free phone call discussion where we'll talk about whether we can help you and what we do and how we can help you move forward with SBIR and STTR. And that's it. I think we're done.
Cool.
That was a lot.
Yeah, it was a lot. Thank you so much. And if anybody has a question you want to type in the questions box, please do so. We have one question that came in really early, and it relates a little bit about some strategy that we often recommend. Question is the NIH SBIR program has 3 application deadlines that span NIH's own cycle for receiving funds from the government. Are there any times of the year that the NIH SBIR programs fund more high-risk research with excess cash at the end of the year, for example, or with new funds coming in? And then are there other times of the year when there are more cautious and funding applications with more minor revisions, or are all 3 application cycles roughly the same during the year? The only thing I can say is normally at the end of the fiscal year, all government agencies are sort of inclined to award all the budgets they can, unless they have an obligation to have carryover money to fund certain things. But as far as most of SBIR money, they try to obligate and spend all the money at the end of the year, and they get refreshed at the next year, assuming they're open for business. So we always suggest that if you've been scored, especially at an agency like NIH, where they've if you've gotten a score and you maybe were not just right below, you were right below the pay line, for example, certainly maintain contact. And if you are in their system, they like you, they kind of know what you're doing, and you're able to reach out to them and say, hey, is there an opportunity to provide some funding? That's an opportunity. You should always maintain contact without bothering them, I think, too much at the end of the year, their fiscal year, which is begins in October. So in September, you should probably reach out to see if there's any money they have available. They might want to award an SBIR to you. Typically, you're going to have something that you've submitted previously they would fund. Not they can't just give you money off the bat, off the top of their head. So there's some strategies like that you can employ, and certainly the NIH is interesting because they're not a topic based. You may not be able to do that as easily with a DoD, although with the DoD side of things, they may be able to give you a phase 3 contract, not SBIR money, but other money. So there's different ways that different agencies to think about it. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, and it does happen a lot. So if you're on you kind of know. Once you get your score, you speak to the program director and you say, hey, what are the chances of funding? Because if you get an 11, you know you're going to be funded, right? That's the best score you can possibly get. So, barring disaster, you're going to get funded. Then there's a gray area kind of above that where you're not sure. And if they, at the end of financial year, if they find they have money left, then often people get a call. People who were on the edge and were not funded, it's not unusual to get a call from them to say, hey, now we have funding available. Or sometimes if there's not time to do that and they really need to spend the money, they'll call you if you have a project and say, hey, can you spend another $25,000, $50,000, which is a nice call to get. It doesn't happen often, but yeah, definitely. If you're on the edge there, then it is possible that you'll get funded even if you weren't the first time in. But in terms of the cycles, it's a mystery at NIH, honestly, how that works and how they balance it. I mean, the program directors know which proposals, you know, they like. They're scored. But the actual internal mechanism is a little bit of a mystery in terms of the annual budget and how all that money works. But as far as we can tell, there is no advantage whatsoever in submitting at a particular time.
And one thing I think we always suggest is to, before you make a submission, is to have a discussion with one of the institutes that you think would be a target. And then certainly if you want to debrief, if you were scored, you were able to get a debrief. If you're not scored, I don't think you get a debrief because it wasn't really reviewed. It was kicked out earlier. But following up on those situations and know why you may not have been scored or why you may not have been awarded, because opportunities come around again perhaps, and you can resubmit proposals, but you want to make sure you address your weaknesses if you are resubmitting. And other opportunities could arise, especially at NIH, where some of the institutes, especially the smaller ones, they're not, the people that you're talking to are not always just engaging with the SBIR money. They can be familiar with other opportunities and other programs that they could steer you to. So that's just some basic thoughts and strategy there. And just as a reminder, CIT, we are available to help you if you're in Virginia. We will be having a second part of this webinar in a couple weeks, and then the third part a week later after that. The BBC is available for, as Chris mentioned, sort of consultation. They'll be happy to do an assessment with you to kind of give you a sense for where you might be, when and if you might be a good candidate for an application. And one thing that is, as Chris mentioned, advanced timing is important. At NIH, you can start planning now for a submission next January. And if you're going the long, slow road, that's what you're doing here. Because there's no reason why you should not have some discussion of the market, understanding who might be buying it, what the value proposition is, who you might sell it to, why they might buy it from you, how much you might even charge for it, or the people charging. If you have to become you need to become aware of the market you're targeting, because that always conveys a little bit in the phase one. The challenge, and we'll learn a little bit next webinar of NIH, is that it's a 6-page proposal with you have to convey a lot of information, and it's a tendency to skip a lot of the market, the need, and because you might see people get awards, or you may have had an award that had very limited or minimal or almost no information on the market. Don't assume that that's a good thing. By conveying some of that information in the proposal, it helps you in the long run, for the phase 2 as well. So think about that, and we hope that everybody can join us next on the 28th of February. So if you haven't registered, go ahead and do that. We'll go more in depth on the actual section by section content and some tips there. And certainly if you're planning at this point to submit in April, we'd love to talk to you and see if we can be of help. And so let us know. And with that, I will go ahead and there's no other questions that have come through. So I will go ahead, and if anybody has any questions after this, please send me an email. I'm happy to chat. Thank you so much, and thank you for your time.